Looks like it's 10 a.m. Carol, do we want to try to do a roll call and see if we have
Sure.
quorum?
Yeah. Okay, Teddy, I have you down as here. Yvonne Caribou. Nolan Cawthon. Steve Fensky.
Good morning.
Fensky present. Steve Georgie.
Present.
Georgie present. Jason Hollanday.
Here.
Hollanday present. Mark Johnson.
Good morning. Here.
Johnson present. Barbara Klein.
Here.
Klein present. Crambier. Brian Crambier.
Good morning. I'm here.
Crambier present. Micah Myers. Bill Stahlberger.
Present.
Stahlberger present. Teresa Sunday.
I'm here. Hello.
Sunday present. Jim Wycombe. He was going to be gone. Paul Wirtz.
Good morning.
Wirtz present. Dave Wolf. Yvonne Caribou. Nolan Cawthon. Okay, so I show Caribou, Cawthon, Myers, and Wolf not here right now.
I think Mike is here.
Oh, okay. Myers present.
Okay, so you only have 4 absent?
Yep. 3 absent.
All right, so I think we have enough to get started. So let's go ahead and do that. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the last Governor's Broadband Task Force meeting. Glad to have everybody here. A couple of things we'll do today. It's predominantly going to be a working session, but we'll do some of the meeting minutes approval, a quick update from the Office of Broadband Development, and then we'll get into the report. I know Scott, I'm glad you're here with us, Scott. Scott was able to share the document late last night, so you should have had it in your inbox this morning. Hopefully had a chance to look at it. If not, no big deal. We'll work through it this morning. And the idea is we'll go through it. We'll see if we have big debates on how we move forward. If we have some things to go back and work on, we'll do that probably this week, and then maybe get a quick meeting again later in the week. If not, if we can get to alignment today, we can vote on the report today, and then obviously if there's some finishing touches, we can always do that between now and the end of the year. That pretty much would take up the whole time, and then we'll end with any other business that we see outstanding. But with that, before we first of all, let me do the meeting minutes approvals. They were included in the calendar invite that was sent out this morning. Any questions, comments, concerns about the meeting minutes? Okay, I'm not hearing any. Before I turn it over to Bree, one thing is we do have a new task force member that has joined us. So Barbara Drower-Klein has been appointed to this task force. And Barbara, welcome to the task force, but want to give you, just like we've done with all other task force members for the last months or so, to just kind of give us an intro of you and why you're on the task force, and so we can officially welcome you to this group.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here in southern Minnesota, and we're pretty dug out, but really cold right now. I want to tell you a little bit about me because I have a really unique perspective. I grew up in Minnesota, and after college went to East Oakland and worked at a runaway shelter and worked in child welfare in Alameda County, Oakland for 16 years. And as a part of that, in working out problem solving, I became a county coroner. That's how we learned to share information. So I'm good at problem solving and bringing groups together. Moved back in the early 90s to be the Leicester County Human Services Director. And that was such a great opportunity to get a small county perspective, and did some really unique things, partnering together with the county groups and other counties, and one of the things that we were most proud of is that we got 4E funding, which is federal funding, in southern Minnesota for child welfare workers. And so it's networking is what this is all about. I went up to Hennepin County and I was a department head up there. And when I came back from California, I noticed that 100% of the child welfare and mental health services were on property taxes, not state and federal dollars, and actually walked the halls of Congress with a Hennepin lobbyist and would talk to them about mental health issues. And we were able to get the community-based services added to the benefit set and off of property taxes. Having been in California for Proposition 13, I have my eye on property taxes, and it should be a last resort for funding. I was recruited to go back to Northern California. I was the CEO of Lutheran Social Services Northern California, and I ended up organizing my neighborhood for fire mitigation. I have great pictures of me with PG&E executives and CAL FIRE, cleaning out ravines and improving our electrical service in our area. And I also got my ham radio license at the Google campus, because that's what we were going to use for disaster planning out there in this canyon in the East Bay. So we moved back 7 years ago, and I'm a financial advisor, and I have clients in California too. And you can Google my name, mental health, MinPost. There's a great article about mental health advocacy with my husband, but we learned that we had frontier internet here. You can also Google my name, farmhouse. You'll see the Minneapolis Tribune article about our farmhouse renovation. We had frontier. So, and I ran for the House in 2018. I door knocked. What did I hear? Broadband healthcare, broadband healthcare. So mid 2018, because of Blandon, we did our first Blandon grant mid 2018, and they sent Bill Coleman down. We had our first provider meeting, and they told us who was going to challenge us and who was going to work with us. And I didn't win, and I'm glad, because I've gotten more done this way. But one of the Republicans said to me that I did more running for office than many have done in office. That was a great compliment. So I can tell you a lot more about our community organizing and planning down here for broadband, but we are rural here. We don't have an economic development person on staff. It was my horse veterinarian that started, who's my county commissioner, started us with the planning, but we did our feasibility study. We put a significant amount of CARES Act dollars in. We have got our first board-to-board grant. Oh, and this is my favorite article ever. The headlines are, this is January 2020, Leesburg County receives $23 million of state grant funds for high-speed internet. I was able to call that before it went into print, and they corrected it. But our unique perspective is it's really challenging down here to try to get things done. Our first border-to-border grant with BevCom, we had to take out households that were not in the same territory because of challenges. We have CAF2 funding 5 years later, never been spent yet. We had the RDOF map issued, knocked us out for 2 years of construction. So, but we keep moving ahead. We have done broadband fairs. Our last broadband fair was about the line extension program. We had the AG staff down here. We had DEED staff here, people talking and communicating. It's really hard to explain to residents what is going on because there are so many challenges to get things going at the local level. And so in terms of I just want to make a couple comments about the annual report that you're doing. I think it's terrific, but just a couple comments and then I can join in afterwards. But really concerned about the challenge process at the local level. I think that, I think we should talk about it next year. I think that counties that are putting money in should have an opportunity to speak at the challenges. We've seen some interesting things. We haven't gone some places we should go. So the challenge process is a question. Of course, we have issues about, we have worries about RDOF and the challenge process with that. I wanted to see a big asterisk on RDOF in the report because yes, we didn't get $300 million, but at the local level, when we look at that, well, we have gotten it 10 years out, and we did a study of the cost for RDOF in our area. And we learned that in Waseca County, the reserve price was 16% of the reserve price is what the bid was. So $300 million is really not even what it would actually cost to build out that RDOF map. So yes, it's a loss of funding, but I don't want to go in there and come back and find out that we got $300 million for RDOF out of an appeals process with the FCC. So anyhow, that's me, that's us. We are rural here, and I'm so glad to be here and to bring our perspective. We've got a lot more work to do down here.
Great. Thank you, Barbara, and welcome to the task force. I can see you have no passion for this.
And one last thing is 5 years ago, I paid $2,700 to run fiber from my neighbor's house because we were in frontier telephone territory. We weren't in the border-to-border grant. So we have it here, and we're real happy. It just came the other way to my other neighbors on the one of the other previous broadband border-to-border. So yes, I am passionate about this.
No, and we'll definitely use your passion. And glad to have you here with us. Okay, so Bree, maybe I'll turn it over to you for a quick update from OBD, and then we'll get into the report.
Well, thank you, Teddy, and good morning, everyone. Just a few updates I'd like to give, but you probably know a lot of them, but just want to flag. Just really happy and excited that we were able to announce the almost $100 million grants that went out about, what was it, almost 2 weeks ago, I suppose the announcements were made, hitting 48 counties, which is, I think Commissioner Grove has mentioned many times, the most counties in one grant round that the state has awarded out of deed. So really exciting work there. And then we did announce at the same time we were going to open up our next RFP today, which I can happily say that the team at the Office of Broadband has working really hard to get that date to match. And so I just want to put a thank you out to the Office of Broadband staff that I am so lucky to be leading with. And so you'll see some press releases, but everything should be live on our website. If you do see anything you have questions on, please flag and let us know. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is we are was there a question? Oh, sorry. Okay. And then just want to flag that we are working really hard on our kickoff event for our BEAD and Digital Equity kickoff event. And I'll just flag that date is January 25th and still working out some finalized details, but in Prior Lake. It will be a day-long event. We are bringing in panelists and speakers from across the state and across different topic areas that include our digital equity conversations, as well as our tribal and our infrastructure teams. So hopefully the save the date will come out by the end of this week, so watch your emails. We'll send it out on our normal blast. All of you will get it, and then certainly there is no threshold of where it can go, so if you know of other people that may be interested in attending, please let us know. We do have the capacity to hold hundreds of people that want to be in person, as well as we will have virtual options. And again, this is partly with the partnership of NTIA's incredible team who's been helping to sort of put all of this together and help us walk through the agenda, all of the pieces of the event, contracting, etc. There's just a lot of behind the scenes, so just thankful for their assistance. And then finally, I'll just say the FCC mapping challenge is, ongoing until January 13th. Again, encourage everybody to take a look at those maps and encourage making the challenges as needed. We are working, I am working through our comms team on doing some press around that to get it out into whether it's, some of the local papers and the news media outlets with some instructions on how to complete those challenges for our residents. And so look for that hopefully by the end of the week. And then I guess one more quick thing is the line extension. Just a reminder, our line extension program is online and on the website. To date, we've had 471 extension applicants, as well as I believe Carol has helped 23 people apply for those applications over the phone. So just know that our office staff, or our team, is more than happy to go the extra mile to help people fill out those applications and answer some questions as needed. So with that, if there's specific questions, which I think Steve's hand is up, but I will be happy to answer or defer to my team who is all on here for more specific information if I can't answer.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I'm just curious. You know, it seems to me that the Office of Broadband is the logical organization for the state of Minnesota to raise concerns about the FCC challenge process. And I think there's upwards of 20 states that have already submitted challenges. It seems onerous to think that local citizens are going to be capable of doing this. You know, I've identified a number of areas in our region that are misclassified, but it's hard to connect with individuals who have seasonal locations to make, you know, submit those challenges. And it just seems that I'm curious if the Office of Broadband is reviewing the map fabric and it also has concerns. And either the task force makes the recommendation to submit a challenge. So, you know, we're in the mix, I guess. So my question.
Sure, and I'll probably pull in a little bit of all of my team as far as just knowing we do, you know, work with MinGeo and internally have our IT or our internal processes as well. I will just say, and obviously not an excuse by any means, but there's a lot going on in this office right now between all of the programs that I have just stated. And so this is obviously another really critical and important piece, and we recognize that. But just our limitations on the staff level that we have and the ability to get everything done is challenging. And certainly the time frame that the FCC put out there during the holidays has also been a little bit frustrating as well, just because we all know things sort of shut down. But Diane, any additional thoughts on that? Janice, I just don't physically do the mapping myself.
Yes, we are working with MinGeo. First of all, Minnesota didn't have a state address level data set, so we're working on that. And then we have our provider data, but the letter is going out, or the press release, the format, I think, is still to be determined, because if you disagree with what our maps show, then your best bet as a resident is to challenge the FCC maps, because our maps show what we have on our website. That's the information that we have. So if you don't think our maps are right, or the FCC maps, you can always ask us to revisit our maps, but the deadline is set for folks to challenge the FCC maps. And so that's what they should do at this point. We're not going to be able to challenge what a local person thinks is wrong on a map if we haven't been told that before. So that's why we're pushing it down to the local level to challenge.
Diane, I think I heard something in addition to what Steve was pointing to in his question, that there are other states that are actually challenging the process itself, not the individual challenges of locations, that there might be some opportunity for the state to put in some kind of a request to say the deadline of January 13th is too soon. Can we put an extension request in, something like that?
Yeah, and we have been encouraging that from our office higher up. To date, it hasn't been done. I think it's all I can say at this point.
And I will just say at like a national leaders level, the conversation, a lot of the professionals that come in from NTIA and different is that there's some legal reasons why the FCC can't change the dates because of some of the timelines or the legislation, like law And so they're trying to, we were really close at one point to joining, and then we had to pull back because of some of the new information that's coming out. So just remember, all of this is sort of like a moving target and shift that keeps moving back and forth, and every day we're getting new guidance. So we obviously want to do what's best for Minnesotans, but also recognize that we want to do it right and not just jumping on things that don't make sense either or can't be done. And again, as Diane alluded, we're working on it as best we can within our office too.
Thank you.
Yeah, Barbara has a question.
We are new to Congressional District 2, Angie Craig, and we have talked with her, and we have talked with Senator Klobuchar's office, and I just think I see this as being not Deed's role to advocate for this, but the governor's office to talk to our congressional people about what's up with the feds. And I hear this a lot, that in rural Minnesota, they don't feel the governor's office is standing up for us enough. They're not challenging the FCC enough. I just think this is a great opportunity for the governor's office to stand up and talk to our congressional delegation about what the barriers are to the current broadband issues.
Bree and Diane, just one quick clarification. Do you know if I know the January 13th date is out there. Is that for the full disbursement of the $42 billion from NTIA, or is it just the first round?
This is, this is that's the deadline for the map that the FCC is going to create. And then the NTIA, and Tom is on too, he can probably explain this a little bit better, but then NTIA has its process where, as I understand it, they'll do an allocation and then the states have an opportunity to challenge the allocation. So this is going to play out over several months in 2023.
That's right. And the FCC maps, just because I was on a different task force, it's not static. I mean, it's not just January 13th and they're locked. You can challenge it all along, right? The real question is the disbursement of the funds. And from my understanding, it's just one round. It's just the first kind of round that this is being sort of collected. There's many times to be able to challenge this as we go forward. So it's not like January 13th is the end all be all, just for everyone to know. Steve, Georgie, go ahead.
I'm kind of switching gears now. I want to go back to the last mile application that you were talking about. You had 471. Are those coming from providers or individuals? I have a friend who's in a rural location, contacted Frontier, who installed fiber in the ditch, and they were like clueless. No, absolutely no interest in making an application. So is the individual homeowner to make the application?
Yes, Steve,
Okay.
If you read the law, it is the homeowner or the business owner that has to submit the application and attest that they don't have service of 25/3.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
And just, Steve, as you're talking to people, a reminder, we are happy. We've processed paper applications as well, and Carol has been incredible at walking through applications over the phone. So if people don't have the access they need to fill out the form, please encourage people to reach out to the office.
Okay. Tom, I'm guessing you give us some clarification.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of give the NTIA information on kind of how we're seeing those FCC maps. So the January 13th date is when the FCC is saying all of the challenges that are in before that are going to be processed by the June 30th date. And that's when NTIA is going to say, these are the maps that we have. Here's how we're going to make the allocation. Because of that, the encouragement is to focus challenges on availability, right? If you do or do not have access to the qualifying services, which is licensed fixed wireless and wireline delivering below 25.3, that's going to affect the allocation. If you have locations that are missing, the recommendation is to focus on those where you also have availability data, because that's going to ultimately be what affects the funding that comes to Minnesota for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. There are rolling challenges, so you can continue to submit challenges to the FCC, and those will be processed. There's just not a guarantee that it'll be processed by that June 30th date when NTI is going to say, here's your amount. And on top of that, there is the what Minnesota needs to reach for 100% connectivity for the BEAD mandate. That's going to keep on as a rolling process. And then there is the state level challenge process. So Bree's office is working on the 5-year plan. When the funding amount, that June 30th date, is announced, it's going to kick off the beginning of developing the initial proposal. At the end of the initial proposal, there's a state level challenge process. And that's where folks, organizations, nonprofits, government entities, ISPs can submit challenges and say, here are locations that need to be served as a part of this program. They can also be included as part of funding applications. So, an ISP can submit an application and say, these locations should be considered eligible for this funding. And it's going to create some of that rolling process to define what locations need to be served. That's going to be ongoing. That initial allocation, that's the big piece for the January 13th cutoff. That's going to determine how much funding comes to Minnesota. And so for that date, the recommendation is to focus on your availability data, because that's what's going to determine our funding. Sorry, your funding.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, good conversation on this, and hopefully there's a little bit more clarity here. But obviously it's an ongoing process. So, okay, so getting into the meat of our work today is to look at our recommendations. I'm sure Scott will share his screen here in a minute. And then obviously we have 2 subgroups. And then we'll do one topic, take a break, and then do the other topic and see where we land. So with that, Scott, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you.
And us bringing this up, obviously, let's use the raise the hand, which I think everybody's doing really well here. I will make sure to monitor that call and give everybody an opportunity to state your comments or questions or concerns. We can make adjustments on the fly as we go if there's something critical here. And so we'll see try to make as much progress as we can here.
Is there anybody from the task force who has not been able to log in and see the report? So I can put the link again in the chat if that's needed, but it looks like a lot of folks are logged in currently. So just a quick review. The report format is essentially the same as last year. The new elements would be the executive summary and the updates to the initial chart that shows where we are relative to our connectivity as of end of October 2022 with the latest updates from Connected Nation, and then the primary components of the individual subgroup work on funding and mapping and affordability and adoption and usage. The parts that need to be finalized are toward the end of the report with some of the stats. We probably won't touch on those today. I'm going to lean into the latest information that I've gotten from the Office of Broadband to make sure that the counts that we rely on to come up with those stats are 100% accurate. So if there's any questions right now about the overall format or just observations that people have made in the amount of times they've had to look at it, let's throw the general questions out there now. And then we'll start going into the details. And I'm only seeing a very small number of folks on my screen, so you're going to have to raise your hand and let us know.
Yeah, I'll monitor for that, Scott. So.
Okay, got it. So is everybody seeing my screen then with the first page up? Good. See some head nods. Thank you. So the executive summary on slide 4. Does anybody have any questions about that, or comments or suggestions relative to the information as that's summarized there for the executive summary? Anything else that should be prioritized, highlighted, other than what is included here? All right.
And Scott, yeah. Oh, Steve Georgie has a hand up.
All right, Steve.
You know, I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but our estimates indicate that the legislature will still need to dedicate additional resources from reserves to fully meet the need. You know, again, I think the impetus has to be on base level funding from the legislature. We need to get them to this different mindset that this is not something that's going away easily. It takes a real investment, and the state has not done that to date. And so I'm reluctant to let them think they're going to get by tapping into a few reserves. They need to commit to base funding to meet this objective of connecting Minnesota.
Got it. So, Steve, I think that there's probably a way to capture that more clearly in this executive summary, but we do point to that later on in the report, and how the mechanics of that actually work are probably a little bit more complicated than we can explain in a short paragraph. So that was my challenge, is trying to
maybe Scott, right, what if we removed, and again, this is open to everyone, but just remove the word still and remove the word additional from that. However, our estimates indicate that the legislature will need to dedicate resources from reserves to fully meet the need.
Happy to make that change.
Because Steve, I think what you're saying is it's an ongoing thing. It's not one and done, right? That's the. I think we've always agreed to that in the past. Barbara, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to address this, but there's the impression that there's this big bucket of federal dollars coming down, and so we don't need to do anything more, and that's part of what Steve is talking about. But I went to Farm Fest, and the whole talk was reconnect, reconnect, reconnect. There's money coming down the ag side. We met with our two providers, and the reconnect consultant went through the application to apply, and it doesn't make sense for us. We're not qualified or eligible. So I don't know how that can be broken down, or maybe that should be done at another point. But legislatures don't understand that counties are, that there are areas that are not eligible for some of those buckets that are out there, and so that's a piece of the challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Barbara. And later in the report, one of the recommendations is that there's actually an advocacy approach to help legislators understand all of the intricacies, and that there would be a group, and maybe it's the Broadband Task Force as a group, sits down with the legislature to explain the funding pieces.
So Barbara, let's get through that, and then at that point, if you feel like it's still not addressed, we can figure out how we bring it back. Does that make sense? Okay.
So the next slide is simply a recap of what our statutory goals are. This made it front and center for all of the legislators reading it. There's links to the underlying reports that tie to those goals listed so that they can see the most recent as of October 31st, 2022. And the comparative goals are also stated there. That's something that Bernadine brought up last year that we added in. Any questions on that slide? All right. Next one is our estimate of coverage and availability. Very, very little change, as you can see from last year. It's pretty much flatlined, which was to be expected based on the challenges with no grant rounds and various slowdowns on installations. So that's been extended out through October of 2022.
Steve, Scott, on this one, sorry. I think one thing we made a change once, maybe it was lost, just where the dot ends, like what the actual number is, right? Like 92 point some percent, right. Whatever. Right. So we could put that in, but that's not, I mean, just.
Yep, I'm going to add that to my list of notes here. Okay, got it.
No other hands.
This is a summary of where we're at relative to the comparative goals. Very, very slight updates. Correlates pretty much to the graph itself. The underlying data for our ranking in each of those three comparative areas hasn't changed a great deal, and frankly, there's not a lot of good resource to identify, multiple lists of where we stand as a state, particularly on the global front. So we're relying on a limited data set, but generally speaking, it hasn't changed a great deal from last year. Any questions on that? So the next few slides are going to be on the funding, the mapping, adoption, affordability, and usage. And one of the changes from last year, a recommendation that came forward from this group, was to align the numbers from each of the sections in the challenge area with the numbers in the recommendation area. And we have followed that same approach this year.
Brian Crambier has his hand up.
Thanks, Teddy. I just have a couple suggestions to the committee on this. The 1.1.2, really it's my understanding that the RDOF funds really are going to be reallocated for BEAD. So it's really not a retraction or a loss of funds, but maybe to Barbara's comment that we could put in there that, changes in the reallocation of federal funds and different programs is taking time and creating delays for access. Because that would maybe capitalize a little bit on some of that, but we're still getting the federal money. It's just not an RDOF. It's going to be reallocated under BEAD. And then under 1.4, I would really like to see permitting be almost number 2. I mean, it's a matter of supply chain issues, but if we don't get permitting, we're not going to be able to do any of this. And that's really significant, I think, going forward. So those are just 2 of my suggestions, Scott.
Got it. Thank you. So prioritize the permitting up to the top. And generally speaking, these aren't necessarily listed in priority order. Both of the subgroups had tried to do some categorization of emphasis, but didn't necessarily put them in priority order. So I would love to hear from any of the subgroup members as to whether there should be some of these that we should actually say that they're in a priority order, if that's what our intention is. So thank you for that, Brian.
New Jersey. Oh,
Yeah, I guess I'm curious, Brian, where you got that information on RDOF funding, because everything that I've seen about RDOF is those dollars that have been not awarded don't go anywhere until the next RDOF auction. So I'm curious about where you saw that they're going to be reallocated into B. Maybe Tom Karst has some information on that. And then on this slide, we were working on the new cost per connection. And I don't know that I've seen that in the report. And it just seems that, you know, the number has gone from about 5,000 or 5,400 to well over 9,000. And again, I don't think we can emphasize enough to the legislature, you know, how far we've fallen behind because of 2 years of no grant funding and the cost that it's going to take to catch up. So I'm not sure where that
will be a slide on that, Steve. We've got the numbers in hand. We just have to place them. So there will be an emphasis on that, and we'll kind of tie that to the idea of having a legislative meeting where people can get together and explain the nuances of that with the legislators that would be most influential in doing something about it. Tom?
Tom, maybe have a clarification.
So yeah, Brian, I'd also be kind of curious to hear where you heard that. To the best of my knowledge, and I just dropped a note over to my team members, and they're on this as well. The RDOF funds are going to stay in RDOF and will be, you know, allocated in the next round of RDOF. Those funds are not going to be coming into as a part of the BEAD allocation or BEAD distributed funds.
Okay, I think it was a statewide or a national rural telecom discussion where I picked that up on. The thing that I guess I was trying to clarify is, okay, LTD in particular was awarded the RDOF award, and they were then not found to be able to fulfill that requirement or that application. So that went away. So those areas that were designated federally as being served were no longer then being listed as being served. So they in turn became eligible for BEAD dollars to be utilized in those areas. So that's kind of where I was heading.
Oh yeah, and that is correct. Where it's about areas and locations that are eligible for funding. So yes, that's correct. So I appreciate the clarification.
Okay, so before we move on that one, so Brian, do we still need to change the language on at least what is 1.2 right now, which we might change, but further clarify what you're stating?
I think we can clean it up a little bit.
Yep. I made a note about that. Thank you.
I'll list, maybe for the essence of time, maybe I will try to throw something together and shoot you an email, Scott, and
awesome.
Work it that way.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay. Barbara?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that would be a good spot to add some language about the Reconnect program that a lot of communities are not eligible for. Because like I said, at Farm Fest, everybody's out there, reconnect. Maybe just some language about one of the challenges of the federal funding is it's more complicated and not everybody's eligible in some areas, but maybe add some reconnect language to that as well.
Got it. And that's the funding coming through the Ed department, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Got it.
Okay. We'll also include something around that. That sounds good. Now, question for the group before we move on from this. As Scott stated, the challenges as well as the recommendation. Number one, challenges and recommendations match the 1.1, 1.2, etc. So but they have not been done in a priority order. They've sort of just been listed out. Do we want to make sure that they're in priority order? I'm going to go with yes, unless I hear otherwise. Okay. So Scott, what we could do is make 1.4, 1.2 now, right?
Yep.
Flip that down, but then also means the recommendations will have to be flipped that way.
Yep. They'll get realigned to match the numbers. Okay.
Okay.
So,
Barbara, you had one more hand up.
Yeah, sorry. The other thing I wanted to add, I didn't see it anywhere in here, is the 50% match is really a struggle. The 50 for in rural areas. So you're looking at property taxes or township taxes to supplement that, and that's one of the funny challenges is that for the state of Minnesota is that 50% match.
At one point. Okay, I'm going to add that, Scott.
yeah, I've got that on my notes here. And Barbara, you're at a slight disadvantage because you are coming in new and haven't been a part of subgroup conversations. So I would be happy to circulate the larger group of notes with you after the meeting, just so you've got some other things to reflect on. And maybe some of the folks from that subgroup can also weigh in on where that fits with the rest of the things that were brought forward from those subgroups.
Thank you.
Yep, betcha. All right, let's move to the next slide on mapping. Most of the focus here is on the new FCC maps and the fabric approach, challenge process, and delays related to that.
Steve?
Well, I appreciate the 2.3, again, highlighting the fact that so many of our townships, small communities don't have the capacity really to handle all of the issues that are affiliated with trying to get broadband in their communities and in their regions. So, and I know we point out further on in the report, the Office of Broadband receiving more funding so they can hopefully add additional staff for that. But I just think it's an important point. I don't know how else we can emphasize it, but that is really a hurdle and a barrier for expansion when we just simply don't have the capacity in some of these communities.
Got it.
Tom, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to note on 2.4, June 30th, 2023 is the dates that NTIA is saying it will make its allocations.
Okay. Got it.
Barbara?
Thank you. I want to add that with counties and township, we need help with more than mapping. We are so lucky that we had Blandon to support us from day one, and I have consultants I can call. Most counties don't have that. So we really need to think about more than just helping counties with mapping, but helping counties with doing more community organizing and networking like Blandon has supported over the years.
So I'm wondering, Barbara, if that comes back in the recommendations that match this. Yeah, put it on the side. I think we'll come back to recommendations maybe.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Barbara, that is something that does show up in multiple places in the recommendations. Both subgroups had interest in extending the American Connection Corps folks into more communities because they've been so impactful in how they've done their work. All right, moving on to slide 10, affordability. And once again, I'd invite anybody from our subgroups to chime in if they see something missing or could be better stated.
Barbara?
I just wanted to add that multi-unit housing is a problem for affordability. We actually have people paying more for broadband than rent in subsidized housing. And that, and you look at the mapping issue, it's an issue too, because you got one address, but you might have 30 households there. But I know of subsidized housing where people are paying more for broadband than they are for rent.
Well, Barbara, on that one, could you, I think that's a good challenge to add. Could you send some language to Scott around that?
I can, yes.
Okay, perfect. And then we'll get that added in.
And really helpful to have some specific examples too, Barbara, because I'm sure that that's true elsewhere in the state. And we've got room in the appendix to make references to other things like this that have data behind them. So if you've got case examples, that'd be fantastic to have along with it.
Don't see any other hands, Scott.
Okay, we'll move on to the adoption slide. And just since it might be really, really fine print for some of you looking at your screens, those maps on these two slides are different. The first one was the 25-3 and the second one is the 100 by 20.
I'm just giving it extra time, Scott, for people
Yeah.
tonight, just in case the questions come in.
Gotcha.
Okay. I'm sure we can go back if we need to. So
You bet.
let's forge ahead.
All right. Usage and navigation, and just for general information, the usage component was originally with the mapping and funding group and got consolidated over to the adoption and affordability group. So some of these items as they're expressed here are carryovers from last year, but we've tried to add some nuances in to them. And here's where again, you can see references to counties and townships and cities in the rural areas having challenges maximizing their opportunity to take advantage of funds that are available because of lack of resources, capacity. Carol, do you know if Yvonne ever joined the call? Okay, got it. So, Mark, she had made a comment about shifting the language around literacy, and that sometimes that could be pejorative depending on communities that you're looking at. So we changed that to digital training for the purposes of this report based on a couple of comments that were brought forward from our that subgroup.
No, I'm sorry. I'll chime in just real quick. Yeah, I had seen a couple of messages go back and forth on that, and that seems to make sense.
Thanks, Mark. Any other suggestions for? Go ahead.
I was just sorry, I'm gonna chime in. I just saw Bree posted in the chat that digital skills is what we're trying to use. That does make some sense too, actually.
Thank you, Bree. I knew that there was another word that was floating around, and that actually is a better one. So thanks for offering that up, Bree. I appreciate that. I'm going to change that right now. That was very favorably received at the Land O'Lakes gathering of American Connection Corps folks. Any other suggestions for this slide?
Not seeing any other hands, Scott.
All right. Well, the next slide is just introducing the recommendations.
Yeah, so let's do this. I know we don't want to run through it too fast, right? Let's maybe take a break, Scott.
Sure.
Let's do, it's 10:56. How about we get back together at 11:10? This seems like a good breaking point.
Okay.
Recommendations, and then it's just the appendix, which that should be pretty fast. So
perfect.
Okay.
11:10. Thanks.
11:10. Go get a restroom break and coffee refresh, and we'll see you in a few minutes.